All right, let's just ask the big question right up front. What if the way we've been teaching is, well, completely disconnected from the world we actually live in? Today, we're not just talking theory. We're building a practical guidebook, a real training manual for every educator out there on how to reboot the university for the 21st century. Okay, so our journey begins right here at MIT with this incredible sculpture. It's called The Alchemist. And if you look closely, you'll see it's a person, but they're made entirely of numbers and symbols. You know, all that raw data, all that knowledge. But the figure is looking inward, reflecting. It's really the perfect symbol for the kind of transformation we're talking about in education. And it sets us up for a really critical question. And here is that question, that central challenge. It comes from Otto Scharmer, who wrote the material we're digging into today. He puts it like this. In an era of planetary crisis, what is the role of universities in society, and what should their role be going forward? See, he's basically arguing that our current educational models, they were built for a different time, for an industrial age. And frankly, they're just dangerously out of date for the kind of massive, tangled-up crises we're all facing right now.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this guidebook. First up, we'll look at the why, the university's urgent call. Then we'll rethink your core toolkit as an educator. After that, we'll reimagine the university as a living ecosystem. Next, we'll get into the nitty-gritty practices for regenerative learning, and we'll wrap up by exploring what it means to cultivate a much deeper kind of knowing.
All right, let's jump right into Chapter 1 of our manual, the university's urgent call. We really need to diagnose the disconnect here. Why is this kind of change not just some nice idea, but an absolute must-do-it-now necessity? So the core problem, the real disconnect at the heart of all this, is something Scharmer calls the knowing-doing gap. And you've probably felt this. It's like we're literally drowning in information. We have endless data on climate change, on social inequality, you name it. We know what the problems are. But when it comes to actually doing something about them, so many of us and our institutions feel completely powerless. And get this statistic just blows my mind. A recent report from the UNDP found that a whopping 2/3 of people around the world want to help with climate change. But that exact same number, 2/3, feel like their actions will have zero real impact. They feel powerless. That paralysis, that feeling that nothing I do matters, that is the gap the modern university has to bridge. Okay, so if we're serious about bridging that gap, we can't just slap on a new course or add another requirement. No, we have to go deeper. We have to fundamentally rethink the tools, the very values at the heart of education. This chapter is all about rebalancing your core toolkit as an educator.
And Scharmer poses a really provocative question here. It's a tough one to sit with. What if the very things our educational system prioritizes, the stuff we test for, the things we reward, what if those things are actually the problem? What if they're holding us and our students back from making any real, meaningful change? Now, this diagram does a fantastic job of showing this imbalance. It basically says that to build this new toolkit, we need to rebalance 3 key things that have gotten way out of whack. Let's walk through each one.
Okay, first up, we put way too much value on existing knowledge. The facts, the figures, the stuff we can easily test. But we totally underrate what Scharmer calls not knowing. And that's not ignorance. It's the capacity to sit with uncertainty, to ask really good questions, and to sense what new possibilities are trying to emerge, instead of just repeating what we've always done.
Second, we are obsessed with comfort. Think about it. We love clear syllabi, predictable outcomes, right answers. But real change, the kind of transformation that sticks, that almost never happens when we're comfortable. It happens when we're willing to lean into the discomfort of having our assumptions, our biases, really challenged.
And last but not least, our culture just worships action. Being busy is a badge of honor, right? But so often that just leads to mindless reaction. We just do more of what isn't working. We completely undervalue stillness, non-action. And that's a huge mistake, because stillness is the gateway. It's where deep reflection and genuine creativity come from.
So once we start to rebalance that toolkit, it opens up a whole new way of thinking about the university itself. We can finally stop seeing it as this rigid, siloed institution and start seeing it as a living, breathing ecosystem. And this ecosystem has a natural rhythm, just like breathing. So think of it this way. Breathing in is when students go out into the world. They immerse themselves in real-world challenges, right on the front lines. Then, breathing out is when they come back to campus, back to that reflective space to process what they experienced and make sense of it all.
Now, to make this whole breathing cycle actually work, our guidebook says we need 3 foundational shifts. First, the outer place of learning shifts from the classroom out into the real world. Second, the inner place of learning shifts from just being in our heads to engaging our hearts and our hands. And third, the way we interact, our interpersonal space, shifts away from just debating each other to having generative dialogues where we're actually building something new together.
Okay, this brings us to the real heart of the manual, the how-to section. This is all about the practices for regenerative learning. So enough with the theory. How do we actually do this? What are the concrete steps we need to take?
Well, it turns out action learning isn't just one thing. It has levels. You can see here. Level 1 is pretty basic. It's structured exposure. Level 2 is where it gets interesting, with more immersive learning and real complexity. But the holy grail, the real goal, is level 3, transformative learning. This is where students develop what's called regenerative agency. They're not just solving a predefined problem anymore. They're actually co-creating entirely new possibilities.
But how do you get to that powerful third level? Well, you have to go deeper. Look at this diagram. We can all see the trees. Those are the visible systems and structures. But to get real change, we have to look underneath, to what Scharmer calls the social soil. This is the invisible stuff, the quality of our attention, our relationships, how we listen to each other. It's the root system where all real, lasting change actually comes from.
And boom, this diagram puts it all together. It's the whole system in one shot. Just follow it from left to right. Over on the left, you've got those underrated capacities we talked about. Stillness, discomfort, not knowing. In the middle, you see how those capacities unlock 7 key leadership practices, things like deep listening and co-creation. Those practices are what cultivate that social soil. And when that soil is healthy and rich, that's what makes the deepest, most transformative action learning possible over on the right.
All right, so as we get to our final chapter, we realize something huge. This new kind of university, it doesn't just change how we learn or where we learn. It actually changes our whole definition of what knowledge even is.
I mean, just look at this evolution. For centuries, we were focused on objective knowledge. Then we added subjective and then intersubjective ways of knowing. Labs, seminars, each step built on the last. But this new model, the 21st century university, it adds a 4th dimension. And this is a game changer. It's called trans-subjective knowing.
So what on earth is that? It's sometimes called fourth-person knowing. It's about getting beyond just my ideas or even our group's ideas. Have you ever been in a really great conversation or a brainstorm where an incredible idea just appears? And it doesn't feel like it came from any one person. It feels like it came from the group itself. That's it. That's the feeling of creativity coming through you, not just from you. And that, right there, is the source code for deep, transformative change.
And maybe the most important thing to take away from this whole guidebook is this. This isn't some fantasy for the distant future. It's not a utopian dream. The seeds of this 21st century university, they're already here. These action learning hubs, these deep listening practices, they're already happening right now in pockets all over the world. Which brings it all back to you, the educator. This manual we've walked through gives you the blueprint. It gives you the practices. The seeds, as we said, are already here. They're not waiting to be invented. So the only question left, the really important one, is how will you cultivate the soil?